You had me at Cello, Cello. You had me at Cello. You had me at Cello. Oh, you had me at Cello.
Good afternoon, everybody. 5 o'clock on a Friday again. Time for another episode of Cello Chat. And with me this week is Meredith McAlmon, my good friend. How are you doing, Meredith?
I'm doing great. It's Thanksgiving break. I'm getting reacquainted with myself and doing well. Thank you.
All right, outstanding. Well, so would you begin by just explaining your particular musical journey to cello in the first place and how you got where you are today?
Sure. I was born and raised in El Paso, which is in Texas, on the border of Mexico and far west Texas. And so a lot of people, if they've heard of it, can't really, wrap their heads around the fact that El Paso was actually a very rich community, a very rich musical community, and still is. So my mother was a professional musician. She had graduated from Northwestern with a master's in piano performance in the mid to late 40s, right after World War II, which was kind of an unusual thing for a woman to be doing at that point. She was very young at the time she got her master's. I believe she was 21 or 22. And she toured around a little bit for a couple years and didn't really like it, and was offered a job in El Paso teaching at a girls' school, also offered a job in Hawaii. But at the time, Hawaii just seemed so far to her, and she took El Paso, and the rest is history. So she met my father there, and he was not by profession a singer, but he had a wonderful voice, and he loved music. And his profession was in radio, TV. They had a lot of friends. I remember music from a very early age. My mother taught piano. Our home was not really large, so I could hear everything happening all the time and knew I had to be very quiet while she was giving these lessons. And they were very active in the musical community in El Paso and went to the symphony and participated in a lot of musical events. And I do remember that whenever there were gatherings at our house, there was always music involved in some way. So it was sort of something I didn't even think about. When I was 6, I started piano because that's what you do. And I had a really amazing, a little bit formidable, but as I grew to know him over the years, very, very tender-hearted, sort of the velvet fist and the iron glove piano teacher. I started cello at 9 because in El Paso, you could take music, you could take orchestra in the public schools starting in 4th grade, which was wonderful. And I had a fabulous teacher who was a cellist. And so I thought I definitely like this instrument. Coincidentally, I had not thought of, I think about him all the time, but had not been in touch with him. He left because he was offered a wonderful position, I think, in the Colorado Symphony. He went on to have a musical career and teach in universities and so on. But he found out, looking him up while I was thinking about this interview, he just died about a year ago. So, and had a wonderful, well, he would have been close to 80, but his whole career was music, and he was very inspirational to me. So I continued with my cello studies, and it seems like my teachers in El Paso kept getting jobs and playing jobs and leaving. So my middle school teacher got a job in the Cleveland Orchestra as a violinist and left. And I sort of left cello at that point. I think I had just sort of lost I wasn't enjoying it. It was quite a while ago. The world was a very exciting place, and I couldn't really see how cello tied into, Woodstock and all these things that were going on. And it just didn't seem cool to me, I think I'm ashamed to say. So I left. My junior year of high school, I had just, I don't know, I don't remember what did it, but I just knew, ooh, this was a big mistake. I went back to my piano teacher. I picked up cello again. Obviously, I was 3 years behind, but somehow managed to catch up. So my parents got me a private teacher. By my senior year, I was able to get into the program, University of North Texas, and I majored in piano, minored in cello, flipped that at the semester and majored in cello, minored in piano. And then the rest of my undergraduate career was basically trying to find somebody that could really teach me how to play the cello. And so anyway, I ended up through various reasons I ended up at UT Austin. I got married. My husband decided to go back to school here and and we ended up here. I connected with Phyllis Young, and I like to say that's where my cello life began. So during that time before we came here, I played with I was able to get into a chamber orchestra. I'd really scrambled to try to get my cello skills back and running. And as a solidly middle-class kid from El Paso who had never left the country, I was, I think at the age of about 20, I got into a chamber orchestra that, along with the choir, we rehearsed from 8 till almost midnight for about a month, 5 nights a week, and then toured Europe, 7 countries in 3 weeks, and gave concerts in Notre Dame and Chartres and some really amazing places in Europe. It was a professional orchestra. Some of those people, some of the singers went on to be on Broadway, and a lot of the people that were in that orchestra are now, I know that our concertmaster, Jose Cueto, is very active in Los Angeles. So it was just an absolute, almost jaw-dropping experience for me. And I realized then that kind of brings me to my big theme of all of this is what inspires me. So I don't know how I can go on all day. I mean, I ended up here. I've been in Austin ever since I was with Phyllis Young, who was the great inspiration in my life. And because of her, I've been able to have some wonderful performing opportunities as a cellist. And I am teaching now for about the last 16 years. I had a private studio. Before that, I had a private studio and performed. And then for about the last 16 years, I've been teaching an orchestra program in Austin, so in middle school. So.
All right, and which middle school?
It is now called Lively Middle School, which it most certainly is. It was called Fulmore up until about 3 years ago and was renamed because of some connections that the Zachary Taylor Fulmore had with the Confederate Army. So it was renamed after a really, truly great educator who was very involved with the school until she was, due to age, no longer able to, Sarah Beth Lively. So we are now Lively.
All right, excellent. So let's talk a little bit about Phyllis Young. I mean,
let's do.
Yes, the descriptor of a cello teacher being truly unique and brilliant does apply to a lot of people. Fortunately, that's the case in the world. But of course, the specifics of that uniqueness and that brilliance are where the fun is. And I mean, not a day goes by when I don't think about Phyllis Young's either the specific content of things that you would say, or just even her approach, her general way of thinking. I'm just wondering, what are some of the things that keep resonating in your head about what you learned from this?
Oh my gosh. I someday I may write a book, and I have to get up and grab this. I meant to, but I keep this. I have this. I don't know if you can see it. I have this picture that I always keep of me with. I have lots and lots of pictures of Phyllis Young, but that's just sort of one that turned up, and it's with me all the time. You know, I feel so much of the time like I'm channeling. I will call her Phyllis. I never once in my entire career did. She was Mrs. Young, but it's quicker. I feel like, you know, she was just, again, it's like my life started, my musical life started with her. I have one of her very large paintings in my orchestra room, so I can see it when I'm conducting, and it's a very kind of vibrant green, and it's just like everything I do. There are elements of what I learned from her. The biggest thing I got, and it's the one thing I didn't get from my other teacher, who was such an inspiration to me and still is also, but the biggest thing I got from her is that music, it is this sense of community, that we don't do this in a vacuum. And in my lessons, you know, somebody would knock on the door that they needed something real quick or a signature, and she would say, now come in, you've got to listen to Meredith. Now, what do you think? And, you know, there was always this wonderful sense of we're all in this together, and we're all, you know, helping each other find that perfect tone and that perfect blend. And it was her just involvement with you as a student that was so inspiring. It didn't, you know, her involvement did not end when your lesson was over. And she was the only teacher I've had who my piano teacher, yes, that was part of what his was, just such an absolute genuine love of music and the piano, but he was the opposite. He was a very kind of I want to say hermetic, is that a word? He was a very kind of an introverted person who just didn't understand why all you wanted to do was be at the piano all day long and play, and who needs anybody else, which in a way can be a little bit, goes along with the piano too, which is why I switched. But she, just the fact that she created this community and this involvement with you. I'm sure all of her students have experienced the phone call at 8:00 at night. Now, you have your cello, right? I've been thinking about this. Now, put your left arm, and would be sitting on the phone with my, you know, cello, or my right arm, I'm sorry, you know, doing something, and then she, okay, bye now. And then,
That's right.
you know, or I know at the beginning when I first started working with her, she had me coming every day for a few minutes so she could monitor, you know, the wonderful changes she was making in my technique. So what I've tried to do in the same way is, you know, be involved with my students, which is a little bit trickier when you have 70 rather, or 100, but at the same time, I'm seeing them every day. So
yeah, excellent. So, and let's see, at your program, you have guitar and used to have mariachi.
Yes. So I was, did I interrupt?
No, absolutely. Just tell me.
I get so excited. So I was actually hired at Lively, or Fulmore at the time, to do their orchestra program and their mariachi program, which I had mariachi for one period a day, which was all that you could fit in, and have the beginning and intermediate and advanced orchestras. So it was really challenging, but at the same time, growing up in El Paso, having, you know, being sort of mildly fluent in Spanish, and there was already some tradition of mariachi at Lively. I had to kind of put the whole program together because I didn't have anybody guide me on this, and I found some music, and it was, I almost can hardly remember how we got this going. It was very challenging, but somehow it all kind of fell together. And I had in one class, I would have all of the instruments: violin, vihuela, guitarron, no trumpets, no singing, but we managed to put together about a 20-minute program. And I counted I think the second year I had it, and I had some really enthusiastic kids. We did about 27 performances in the community, which was crazy. But, things were also a little bit looser then as far as rules and regulations, and it was easier just to take them out. The great thing about that program was that it brought a lot of students in, and families that otherwise were real fringe, would have been really on the fringe. It brought them into the school, which I loved, because, people feel isolated we have a lot of people that are primarily Spanish speakers. It was a wonderful mix of kids. Again, I keep getting back to this. My big word is community. And so I had kids who came from privileged backgrounds. I probably had about I had more than that, maybe 8 to 15 kids at any time. Kids from very privileged backgrounds, kids I had a boy who had ridden a bus 7 hours by himself from Mexico when he was younger, like 7 or 8, across the border and ended up in Austin to join his mother. He'd been with family. And he was amazing. He was amazing, guitar and vihuela player. There was a lot of real natural musicianship, and very determined. So I think all of the kids became really good friends, and some of them still come back and see me, and they're in touch with each other. So, we found boxes full of uniforms, and we had uniforms, but the difficulties of that was having just one period, and it became more and more difficult as the mariachi parts for violins are, even the easiest ones are definitely challenging. And then on the other hand, you have the guitarist playing 3 or 4 chords, maybe 6 or 7 if the song's a little harder, and so the discipline management was hard, because you have middle school kids, some whom it's real easy, some of whom, and so I was really running into problems once this got going of how do I work with the violins and how do I keep the guitars busy. So this is sort of leading to how we became a guitar school. I talked to Noe Sanchez, who is one of the leading mariachi educators in this country, and happened to see him at a TMEA conference, and was talking to him about this a little bit. And he said, you need to start a classical guitar program. Your guitarists have to be in that program, because then when you're working with the violins, they can work on their solos. And, one thing led to another. And I realized how much more musically that the kids were getting from being in classical guitar. The violinists already had orchestra, the string players, but the kids that were in classical guitar were actually learning to read music and learning to play more. And I was lucky to be able to partner with Austin Classical Guitar, just kind of came in and helped me. They pretty much almost did the guitar program for me for several years. And I was able to work with Jeremy Osborne, who was one of their directors, and they were a tremendous help, or I couldn't have done it. And now we have guitar in every school, most classical guitar in most of our schools in Austin, which it's a mixed blessing. I know some people are. To me, it's whatever will get the kids in and playing music. Right. Guitar has a real instant street appeal and recognition. So the issue there is we do lose some kids that might have been in orchestra, but that really want to play guitar. But you work with what you've got.
Yeah, it is an interesting. I mean, because obviously, ASTA includes the bow string instruments and guitar and harp, and I'm sure probably in your private studio, you've also had people who have wanted to switch or add cello who have already knew guitar.
Yes, yeah.
A lot of facility from the left hand. And even it's kind of funny because it seemed like some of the various techniques books for school string programs use at least some element of kind of the tablature way of, look, just put your fingers
yes.
here.
Yes, the finger charts in the back of every, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is. There's a lot of yeah.
Yeah, right.
This.
Exactly.
And
diagram,
so again, I love classical guitar. I've always loved it. I did on my senior recital. My closing piece was a piece by Brothamus Gnatali for cello. It was a sonata for cello and guitar. And at the time, it was quite an effort just to find the piece. And I loved it. I've always thought cello and guitar are such a beautiful combination. And in fact, I do not a lot, but I do a significant amount of performing with cello and guitar, and I'm working on something right now. So I play the cello, of course, not, but we have a very rich guitar community in Austin. So
yeah, nice. Okay, now the topic of motivation, it's kind of been mentioned a couple times already, but those students, and of course, it's not like they're a monolithic group either, but I think there's always going to be a certain sizable percentage of students who, at least for a particular stage in their life, before they have either found the way to motivate themselves or gotten enough in the habit of practicing that the habit itself has some real momentum, and then they see the rewards and they learn to enjoy the process. What are some of the things in your approach that you found work for students who want to be inspired to practice and play more, but would like that outside help?
Well, my big word here it's community. And I actually had kind of an epiphany this fall, which I had, we've gone to a block schedule at my school, which I'm not fond of. And so it means that I don't see students every day. I see them every other day. I see them 2 days a week for an hour and a half at a time, but there's a day in between. So I'll see one group of kids Monday, Wednesday, Friday, one group Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And I found that to be very challenging. And they get tired. If I have to be gone, like there was a day where I had to take my some students to an all-city concert that they were performing in. I can't, the idea of missing an hour and a half of class and just having a substitute sit there, this is actually going, I promise I'm getting there. So I was trying to think, well, what can I do? We've got a concert coming up, and I got some of my advanced students, and they, had to work out with their teachers and talk to them. This is what I need you to do. And I had them come in and work with my beginners for that hour and a half under the guidance of I had a substitute in there that I knew who was a trombone player, musician. So he knew at least what was going on. And under his guidance, they worked with the students. They taught them their songs. They helped them with their songs. And when I came back, the students loved it. And the interesting thing to me is they'd made a whole lot of progress. They said, look, one of my advanced students, Mia taught me how to play this whole song, and she did. So I think there was something exciting to them about getting to work with somebody their age who's been through that. And it was, again, that sense of I'm doing what other people are doing, and other people can, did this once and they're better. So it's having, to me, practicing is so hard. It's hard for me now. I mean, it's the process of getting your instrument out and doing the warm-ups that you need to do, but there's finding that inspiration is hard enough for me sometimes. So I think how for someone, I think the hardest part of us being a string player is the beginning, because it's so awkward, trying to put this piece of wood under your chin or between your knees, and then you have another piece of wood with horsehair strung on it, and you've never heard of rosin, you've never heard of, I take for granted a lot of things. I realize I need to be a student. I assume they know things that they don't know, and it's just bizarre. I mean, it's truly bizarre. Trying to hold this weird instrument that doesn't feel right. It's not a guitar. You've never heard of it before. And so having other people help you, I think has been great. I try to do some fun things. Like I found, little things that'll liven it up. In the classroom, I found a song by Leon Redbone. You have to Google that one if you're not familiar with him. But he takes old, like 20s and 30s songs, and he has a song about my walking stick, and he's the bow is our walking stick, and with Leon Redbone in the background we do different things. So I try to keep it fun and lively, but it still comes down to they're doing this together. And so motivating students to practice, I have to think, well, what motivates me to practice? Usually it's I have something coming up. I'm preparing for something. I really want to play this. I was in one of the things I loved during my cello career. For about 4 years, I was part of the Austin Cello Quartet, which one of our members moved, and then our jobs changed, and we haven't been able to get it back together. But we all had other jobs, but we would meet. We rehearsed on Saturday afternoons and played a lot, and it was just so much fun. That sound of four cellos, or the sound of an orchestra, or the sound of a string quartet. So I try to have things that they're working towards, and I do give them a practice rubric. Which is, I try not to keep it too much like another class. This is your homework, but no one ever told me how to structure my practice. And except for my piano teacher, but that didn't help a lot with cello. And so I think just teaching them how to practice and giving them something they can look at. Oh yeah, I do this. And this is, again, the community thing. I got this as a student of Phyllis Young's. I didn't get it from her, I will have to say, but she had several students that had gone over to Germany to study with Navarra, and they came back with Andre Navarra. They came back. He was probably the extreme example of, how to practice. And I think it was a little over the top, but they brought back his method, and I sort of combined that with hers and try to find a way to have students see that what you're doing is leading to this. It's musical. If you play a scale, it's still musical. So when we play scales, I try to put guitar in the background or have them improvise a little bit, something so that they can tie what they're doing in their practice to where it's going to go.
And yeah, I love that. It's interesting you mentioned Andre Navarra. Mrs. Young would, Phyllis, all right, I'll give myself would mention Navarra and her connections with him. And then so it wasn't surprising. I mean, this was pretty early in my studies with her when she brought in somebody who was going to kind of talk about Navarra and his system. But it struck me as so different from Mrs. Young's approach. I balked at first.
Yes,
I
it's
thought,
night and day.
yeah. But it's true though that there are, particularly among youngsters, there are some of them that really respond well to structure. In some ways, like the more structured, the better. In other words, some of them will enjoy the freedom of, well, then you determine what you're wanting to work on that day. And as you find that this is helping you get where you're wanting to go, well, then, okay, I'm going to adjust my plan and do more of that. But others like to have very, very structured, systematic approach. Don't you find?
Yes, absolutely. And it's trying, I've been rereading this book by William Pleath, his book Cello, and that series, the Yehudi Menuhin series. I would highly recommend it because he talks about, I think I was rereading it and I said, yes, this is what I'm looking for. He talks about how technique is so important, but it's meaningless. The practice of technique is meaningless if it's not somehow relating musically. You have to tie it in. He's a definite not believer in separating your technical practice from what you're doing, which is interesting because Andre Navarra would, I have notes that I use that were made for me by the friends of mine that went over to study. I had 3 friends that had studied with him. One just studied with him for a year, and one went over with the idea of seeing what it was like. And he stayed the whole course, like 3 or 4 years. I have all their notes, and I have a step-by-step, like 1, 2, 3, of what a Navarra practice routine was like. And it said, if you do this for about 2 hours, then you're ready to work on your music. That was his quote, which anyway, I think you just have to kind of pull from all these things. But to me, William Pleath has synthesized it in that book. And I, again, highly recommend it. It's very readable. It's delightful. He was somebody I wish I could have met. And so.
Yeah. All right. Upcoming plans, irons you have in the fire for either the remainder of 2022 or 2023.
Well, one thing I didn't mention, I can't believe I didn't do this. So one thing I have also used to inspire my students, partly because it's so much fun for me. It's a lot of work, but during the pandemic, I was trying to think, how can I give these students a sense at the end of the year that they've accomplished something? And actually, right before the pandemic, the week before we went into quarantine, March of 2020, I had gotten this idea we have a wonderful dance program at my school. And with our dance teacher, she and I were talking, and we decided to choreograph just for a concert at school 2 of the guitar pieces we were working on that just seemed very choreographable to me. We did that. Somebody, a parent or someone, took a little film of it, and I sent it to my friend Matt Hensley, who is the head of Boston Classical Guitar, and just said, hey, this was really fun. When you just thought you wanted to share it. Well, Matt got really excited and said, can you open the David Russell concert in March? For those non-classical guitarists, David Russell is like the Yo-Yo Ma of classical guitar, one of them. And of course, I said, oh, sure, golly, yes. And then thought, I've lost my mind. But we choreographed these, we tweaked them, and the students this did not involve orchestra yet, but they premiered their dances for David Russell. It was totally professional, in an auditorium full of about 1,000 people. They were so excited about this. It was a wonderful experience, and I'm glad we got to do it before we went into lockdown. So during the pandemic, the year that, not this year, but the year before, when we were sort of dribbling back in, but we were not having, we were having socially distanced rehearsals, and some kids were still on Zoom. But I will try to condense this. I with our dance teacher, we did a project where we had one of my former classical guitar students who got a degree in composition and works with us in classical guitar, wrote a piece for us for strings and guitar. Anybody could work on the piece. We had a core group of players and dancers that would be in person. It was filmed before an empty house in the same Performing Arts Center, but then a company brought in all the videos. Students would record themselves, and we brought their recordings and it culminated, which you can see online if you go to Austin Classical Guitar and just go to their website and go into projects. It's there. And so I try to do a project now every year, some kind of video where we join dance, guitar, and orchestra, so that we're, again, to show that we're not these little isolated entities. We did a big concert. We try to perform with the band some. So again, it just coming back to the idea of connecting and community. I'm looking at projects like that for the spring. We have all of our usual orchestra things, UIL, and our spring is kind of our big competition thing, but I've got another project in the works. We'll see what happens. So that's kind of what I've been doing the last few years, is trying, instead of saying, oh, guitar is taking all the orchestra students, oh, that guitar, trying to get us all together. And the ultimate project. And I got this from my oldest child's jazz ensemble director looked at the kids one day. I just happened to be there because he and I taught at the same school. And he said, he was kind of lecturing them because there was a lot of, this wasn't good and you're not playing this right. He said, music is about community and about working together. And he was a very tough, it took a lot to get a compliment from him. And they really respected what he said. He said, if it's not about community, you shouldn't be here. And that's one of my big quotes.
All right.
So and I share that with my students, along with the other one, which is Casal's at the age of 90, being asked, why do you practice every day? And that ties into practice. And he says, because I believe I'm getting better. So there's your practice answer.
Right. Ties it all in. Outstanding. Well, I'll look forward to seeing you in April for the string project. Right.
And hopefully at ASTA. I'm still working that one out. But
terrific. Outstanding. And good luck with everything in the meantime.
And the same to you and to all of us. It's
right.
Interesting times.
Yes. Well, thanks so much, Meredith. And good luck out there for practicing all weekend and throughout the week. And we'll see you this time next Friday.